Although Spain was not directly involved in the English Civil War, 1642 to 1651, the conflict had important implications for Spain, particularly in terms of diplomacy, trade, and its relations with both the royalists and parliamentarians in England. Spain's role during this period was largely shaped by its broader European and global ambitions, including its rivalry with the Dutch and concerns about the stability of Protestant England. Spain's neutrality and diplomatic interests. Spain remained officially neutral during the English Civil War. At the time, Spain was ruled by the Habsburg monarchy under Philip IV and was heavily involved in the 30 Years' War, fighting in multiple European theaters against the growing influence of Protestant nations. Given Spain's own military commitments in Europe, particularly in the Low Countries, Spain chose to avoid direct involvement in the English conflict. However, the Spanish monarchy did have a vested interest in the outcome of the war, especially because of its rivalry with the Protestant nations of England and the Dutch Republic. Spain's primary interest lay in maintaining stability in Catholic Europe and ensuring that Protestant England did not become a further threat to Spanish power. Support for the Royalists. Although Spain did not formally intervene, there were sympathetic elements within Spain that supported the Royalist cause. The Spanish monarchy had close ties with King Charles I, who was seen as a fellow Catholic monarch facing Protestant rebellion. In addition, the Royalists were seen as potential allies in the wider struggle against Protestant powers in Europe, especially the Dutch and Swedes. Spanish diplomats in England were keen to maintain favorable relations with the Royalists. This support, however, was largely diplomatic and economic, rather than military. Spain also provided some indirect support to the Royalists by allowing Royalist exiles to operate from Spanish-controlled territories, though Spain itself did not send troops or warships to fight in the conflict. Impact of the war on Spain's interests. Despite Spain's official neutrality, the English Civil War had several indirect consequences for Spanish interests. The conflict in England disrupted trade between England and Spain, as both sides were preoccupied with the war and had to protect their maritime routes. Spain also faced competition from Dutch privateers who preyed on Spanish shipping, and the English Parliament, once it gained control of the seas, became a major threat to Spanish interests in the Atlantic. Additionally, the English Civil War's impact on the broader European balance of power did not escape Spain. Spain had to contend with the rise of Cromwell's England, which was increasingly aligned with the Protestant nations of Europe, particularly the Dutch Republic, which was Spain's major rival for global dominance. The success of the parliamentarians in the English Civil War meant that Spain would have to navigate a more powerful and assertive England in the future. Post-war relations with Spain. After the execution of King Charles I in 1649 and the establishment of the Commonwealth of England under Oliver Cromwell, Spain found itself facing a new form of government in England. Cromwell's republican regime was not as hostile to Spain as might have been expected, but the Spanish monarchy remained wary of England's growing influence. Cromwell himself had ambitions to challenge Spain's colonial power, particularly in the New World, and this rivalry would become more pronounced in the coming decades. Spain's role in the English Civil War remains largely one of indirect influence, through diplomatic and economic means. The war weakened England internally, which temporarily reduced the threat posed by England to Spanish interests. However, the English Civil War also set the stage for a future rivalry between Cromwell's England and Spain, particularly regarding the control of overseas territories. Legacy. Although Spain did not play a direct military role in the English Civil War, its diplomatic actions, along with the broader European context, helped shape the war's outcome. The Spanish Habsburgs watched the conflict closely, as the results had the potential to shift the balance of power in Europe. The war and the execution of Charles I were significant events that would influence Spain's relations with England for years to come, especially as Cromwell's regime and later the Stuart Restoration sought to assert English power both in Europe and overseas. In the long term, the English Civil War and its aftermath would contribute to the decline of Spanish influence, while England's power, particularly under Cromwell and the Restoration, would challenge Spain's dominance in global trade and colonial expansion.